My husband's dad called me selfish and even spread rumors at church because I didn't pay for his grandson's private school. "You'd rather burn money than help your family," he screamed. But now, they're regretting everything 10 months later. My name is Rose Hammond. I'm 41 years old and live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I work as a financial advisor. I own my own home, have my own car, no debt, and a pretty comfortable life. I've worked damn hard to get here, too. I didn't come from money. I came from coupon dinners, maybe next year vacations, and a father who worked overtime at a tire factory until his hands were too stiff to hold a fork at night. So yeah, I protect my peace. I protect my money. I protect the life I built. That doesn't make me cold. It makes me careful. My husband, Brix, is a public high school history teacher. He's kind, thoughtful, good with kids. He makes a modest salary but loves his job. We've been married for 13 years. No kids, by choice. We've had a happy enough marriage, at least on the surface. Until last year, when everything blew up over something I never expected to be an issue. It started when Brix's younger sister Janelle, who's a single mom to a 10-year-old boy named Reggie, started complaining about Reggie's school. He was struggling, getting in trouble, bringing home bad grades. I understood how hard that must have been. Janelle worked 2 jobs and barely had time to cook dinner some nights. She was doing her best, but I could see she was overwhelmed. Now, Brix's father, Leonard, is a retired pastor. He's in his 70s, very traditional, loud, and still very active in the same Southern Baptist church he's preached at for most of his life. Everyone in that community still sees him as Pastor Leonard, even though he hasn't officially led a congregation in over a decade. His word carries weight, too much weight, honestly. Leonard decided that the solution to Reggie's problems was enrolling him at St. Augustine's Academy, a prestigious private school on the nicer side of town. It was the kind of place where kids wore blazers and ties and had golf classes and Latin grammar at age 9. I remember the first time it came up. We were having Sunday dinner at Leonard's house, a monthly tradition where he invited his closest family, which usually just meant us and Janelle with Reggie. We were sitting around the table when Leonard set his fork down and said, completely out of the blue, "Reggie doesn't belong in public school. He needs structure. A better environment. Somewhere he can thrive." Janelle nodded, clearly rehearsed. "And I've been thinking," Leonard continued, looking directly at me now, "Rose, you're in a position to make that happen." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" I said, already feeling heat rise in my chest. "You do well for yourself," he said. "I know private school isn't cheap, but you don't have children of your own. God blessed you. Maybe it's time to give some of that back to your family." I didn't respond. I just smiled tightly and changed the subject. But inside, I was stunned. Not only by the audacity of his assumption, but by the casual way he dropped that like it was an obligation, like the money I earned was somehow community property. I waited for Brix to say something. He didn't. That was my first red flag. Over the next few weeks, the hints got louder. Janelle started texting me articles about how poor academic environments stunt young boys' potential. She'd add a line like, "This breaks my heart for Reggie." Leonard sent a link to the St. Augustine's tuition page. Not a word with it. Just the link. As if that said enough. Then, one Sunday, I went to church with Brix, even though I usually skipped it. I didn't grow up in the church and don't have much of a connection to it. But that day I decided to go. Something in me wanted to see what was going on behind the scenes. I wish I hadn't. Leonard got up during the community prayer requests portion, something he still does, unofficially. He stood in front of the room, hands clasped in that faux humble way he always does when he's about to say something pointed. "I'd like to ask for prayer for the spirit of selfishness," he said, voice solemn. "Sometimes those closest to us have the means to help, but choose not to. And the children suffer." I froze. My stomach flipped. And then, people looked at me. They didn't all look. But enough did. Enough to know the rumors had already started. Brix was stone silent on the ride home. I was boiling. "You're really going to let him humiliate me like that?" I asked. "I don't think he meant you directly," he said. "He might as well have printed my face on the bulletin board." I didn't sleep much that night. By the following week, I was officially a villain in our little southern church circle. I started noticing the cold shoulders, the passive-aggressive comments from women who used to ask me about my skincare routine or if I wanted to join their women's prayer brunch. I even got a call from Mrs. Darnell, a sweet older lady who once made me banana pudding for my birthday. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "I heard you're having a disagreement with Janelle about Reggie's education. I just hope you don't let pride get in the way of helping your family." That was it. That was the moment something snapped in me. I sat down at my desk and pulled out my receipts. Literally. 5 years of quiet giving, $3,000 to help Janelle cover her rent when she was out of work. $500 for Reggie's dental work. $2,000 when her car broke down. Gift cards, groceries, babysitting, school supplies. Not once had I asked for anything in return. Not even acknowledgement. I helped because I cared. But now that I wouldn't fork over $18,000 a year for private school tuition, I was suddenly a monster? No. That night, I printed every single receipt and note of those transactions. I drafted a formal letter and mailed copies to Leonard, Janelle, and yes, Brix. In the letter, I wrote, "Going forward, I will no longer be providing any financial assistance to this family. This is not out of malice, but out of self-respect. I have been quiet, generous, and kind. And you all turned my silence into a weapon. The giving stops now. Permanently." I left the house 3 days later. Rented a room at a quiet inn on the outskirts of town. Didn't answer my phone. Didn't respond to texts. I needed space to breathe. Brix didn't call me. Not once. By the 4th day, I sat alone on the edge of the bed, staring at the coffee mug in my hand. I hadn't heard from Brix, not even a "where are you?" or a "can we talk?" At that point, I wasn't even sure what I was holding on to anymore. Was it the marriage? The idea of who I thought he was? Or just the sheer stubbornness of not wanting to be the one to say it was over first? On the 6th day, I went back to work like nothing had happened. I straightened my blouse, walked into my office, smiled at my assistant, and gave myself the speech I'd given to so many of my clients before: stability comes from boundaries. Strength comes from clarity. But behind the calm face, my chest felt hollow. Late that afternoon, Brix finally showed up. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. His shirt was wrinkled, hair messy, eyes bloodshot. He didn't even knock. Just stepped into my office and shut the door behind him slowly. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I didn't answer right away. I studied his face. He looked like a man who had just realized something. Something big. Maybe something that had been sitting in front of him the whole time. He sat down across from me and folded his hands. "My dad's furious. Janelle's been crying every day. Reggie's confused and doesn't understand why he's not going to St. Augustine's." I crossed my arms and waited. That wasn't what I needed to hear. He swallowed hard, and for the first time in what felt like months, looked directly into my eyes. "You were right," he said. Silence sat heavy between us. "I should have stopped them. I should have defended you. I should have never let it get this far. I didn't realize how much you've already done for them, or how much I've asked of you without even realizing it." There was no dramatic music. No hug. I didn't rush to say, "I forgive you." I just stared at him, letting the words settle, letting them carry the weight they needed to. "You didn't just fail to defend me," I finally said. "You watched them hang me out to dry and stood on the sidelines." He nodded. "I know. I hate that I did that." Then he said something I didn't expect. "I want to talk to them. At church. All of them." I blinked. You what? I'm going to speak. After service. I want to set the record straight. Publicly. I didn't say anything. Honestly, I didn't believe he would. But that Sunday, he proved me wrong. Now, I didn't go. I couldn't. The thought of sitting in that same pew again, feeling the eyes of people who had whispered about me like I was some cold-hearted heiress with a vault full of gold, no, thank you. But I heard every detail from 3 different sources. Apparently, right after the closing hymn, Brick stood up and asked if he could say a few words. Leonard was still seated at the front. Bricks didn't ask for permission. He walked to the pulpit, took a breath, and told the truth. He talked about how I had supported the family for years, not just financially, but emotionally. That while others offered opinions and guilt, I offered real help. Quietly. Without recognition. He admitted he hadn't stood up for me when he should have. That he was ashamed of himself. That everything Leonard said about me was not just wrong, it was malicious. He ended by saying, Rose doesn't owe anyone anything. Not me. Not Janelle. Not you, Dad. She's given more than she's ever gotten in return. And if any of you had even half her grace, maybe Reggie wouldn't be in this mess to begin with. He walked out. Just like that. Janelle cried. Leonard was silent. And the following Sunday, Bricks didn't go back. Neither did I. After that, things shifted. Slowly, but noticeably. Janelle stopped reaching out. I think, for the first time, she realized the weight of what she'd done. Or maybe she was just embarrassed. Either way, I didn't hear from her for nearly 6 months. Leonard, on the other hand, went full cold turkey. No more texts, no phone calls, no random church flyers guilt-tripping me into charity. It was like I'd never existed. Fine by me. Reggie didn't end up going to St. Augustine's. Instead, Janelle found a charter school with a reading program and a smaller class size. It wasn't elite, but it was better. From what I hear, he's doing okay. He's even made a few friends and joined a little after-school robotics club. It's not private school prestige, but it's stability, and sometimes, that's what a kid really needs more than anything else. Bricks and I are working through things. It hasn't been easy. We're in couples therapy now. He's made changes, and I can see he's trying. But I've changed too. There's a part of me that's still hurt, still guarded. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some scars don't fade, but instead become reminders. Reminders that we must protect ourselves, even from those we love. Especially when silence becomes their answer to our pain. The most surreal part of this whole thing is how quickly people who once judged me began to backpedal. A few women from church emailed me, saying things like, "We never really believed what Leonard was saying, you know," or "We miss seeing you around." One even dropped off a loaf of banana bread on my porch with a note that said, "Hope we can start fresh." I never responded. Because once you've seen what someone's capable of when they think you owe them, it's hard to pretend it never happened. And honestly, I'm still learning how to forgive, not for them, but for myself. Continued, it was around month 7 when the apologies started rolling in, trickling like an overdue storm. Not the kind you brace for, but the ones that show up late and inconvenient, when you've already rolled your windows up and moved on. Janelle was first. She showed up at my office one afternoon, completely unannounced. My receptionist buzzed me, saying, "There's a Janelle here to see you. Says it's personal." I sighed, stood, and met her in the hallway. She looked smaller somehow, less confident, thinner even. Her mascara was slightly smudged under her eyes like she'd been crying on the way over. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I didn't. But I nodded anyway. We stepped outside onto the quiet little patio behind the office. There's a small bench out there I sometimes use for lunch. We sat in silence for a few seconds before she spoke. "I owe you the biggest apology of my life," she said. "I was wrong. About everything. I let Dad get in my head, and I convinced myself that you were just withholding. But I see now that I was the one who was entitled." She wiped her nose on her sleeve, clearly unprepared. "I've spent years expecting things from you," she continued, "and the truth is, you gave more than any of us ever acknowledged. And when you stopped, it felt like betrayal, but really, it was justice." I watched her carefully, trying to gauge whether this was a performance or a real moment of growth. It felt sincere, raw even. But I was still cautious. "I accept your apology," I said, "but I don't think we're meant to be close again." "Not now." She nodded. She didn't argue. That was the part that told me she meant it. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. "From Reggie," she said. "He made it himself." After she was gone, I opened it. Inside was a crayon drawing of what looked like a house, with 2 stick figures, one labeled me, and one labeled Aunt Rose. Above the house were the words "Thank you for the Legos and books" written in sloppy, sweet kid handwriting. It nearly broke me. Meanwhile, Leonard remained silent. Not one word. Not a single attempt to reconcile. It's funny, in a way. After spending so much time shouting about generosity and family values, he was the one too proud to even knock on the door he helped slam shut. But I heard things. Small-town churches have long, loose strings, and I was still close with a few folks who didn't partake in the gossip. Apparently, Leonard wasn't taking it well. His influence in the church had dimmed, people were starting to question why he'd weaponized the pulpit the way he had. Some of the younger members had even started drifting to other congregations. One woman told me in a hushed voice after running into me at the post office, "He's different now. Quieter. Like the wind's gone out of him." I didn't feel vindicated. I felt numb. That's what people don't tell you about winning. Sometimes there's no feeling of victory. Just fatigue. You're standing in the ruins of a fight you never wanted to be in, knowing you had to burn something down just to be heard. Bricks was changing, slowly but steadily. He'd started doing small things that meant more to me than grand gestures ever could. Like putting his phone away during dinner. Coming with me to therapy and actually talking. Calling his mom, not to vent, but to reconnect with someone who wasn't tied into the church drama. He even asked about my job again, something he hadn't done in a long time. And he apologized. Often. Not in the scripted, "I'm sorry you feel that way" kind of way. But honest, uncomfortable truths. Like, "I thought silence kept the peace, but I realize now it just kept me comfortable." Or, "I didn't see how lonely you were, even when we were sitting on the same couch." We didn't jump back into everything right away. I stayed in my own place for a while. We had dinners, therapy sessions, long drives where we didn't talk at all and just listened to the old Motown station we both loved. I was careful not to let comfort pull me back into a dynamic that hadn't served me. One night, he handed me a notebook. "I've been writing in this," he said. "I didn't know how else to start showing you the work I'm doing." Inside were letters. To me. To himself. To his dad. To Reggie. All written by hand. I read them in bed over the course of 2 weeks. Some made me cry. Others made me feel angry again. But most made me hopeful, not for a perfect reconciliation, but for a more honest version of who we could be, if we both kept trying. The community still buzzes occasionally. I still get that lingering look when I walk into a restaurant or stop at the local hardware store. Like people are deciding how much they're allowed to talk to me, or if I'm still the selfish one. But I don't flinch anymore. You learn, after a storm like that, to let whispers pass through you like wind. They don't settle. They don't stick. They're just noise. What does stick are the lessons. The ones you learn about your own limits. The kind of love that's healthy versus the kind that guilts you into giving until you're empty. And how the real villains in your story might not look like monsters. Sometimes, they smile at you over Sunday dinner and say things like, "God's just testing your generosity." The biggest shift, though, was internal. I started reevaluating more than just my marriage. I started saying no more. I stopped agreeing to things just to keep the peace. I unfollowed every single person from church on Facebook and set my profile to private. I stopped trying to play nice with people who had no respect for me unless I was useful. I joined a new women's group, nothing religious, just a few local professionals who meet twice a month to share meals and swap stories. Real support. No judgment. And I started painting again. Something I hadn't done since college. Bricks noticed. "Your colors are darker," he said, looking at one of my canvases. "They'll lighten," I told him, "when they're ready." And that's the thing. Healing isn't about rushing to get back to who you were. It's about finding out who you're becoming, now that you're not constantly trying to prove your worth to people who never deserved you in the first place. Some days, I still wake up with that tight knot in my stomach, like I'm bracing for something, an email, a text, a phone call from someone needing something. Even after everything, that reflex hasn't fully disappeared. Years of being the reliable one doesn't unravel overnight. Especially when you've been conditioned to equate generosity with identity. But now, when the knot comes, I sit with it. I don't respond. I don't react. I remind myself that peace doesn't come from pleasing, it comes from preserving. A few months ago, I ran into Leonard at the grocery store. I ducked into Harris Teeter early in the morning, hair still a mess, wearing one of Brix's old hoodies. I turned the corner near the frozen foods, and there he was. Holding a box of pot pies and squinting at the label like it offended him. He saw me. And for a second, we just stared at each other, suspended in the kind of awkward stillness that makes time feel thick. He gave a nod. Not the warm kind, not even particularly respectful. Just a gesture. A flick of the head that said, "I see you. You're still here." I gave nothing back. Not a nod. Not a smile. Not a word. Because what do you say to a man who watched a village he built turn on you like wolves, and did nothing but fan the flames? He stepped aside and let me pass. I grabbed my bag of peas and walked right by. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't closure. It was just necessary. Around that same time, the church finally retired Leonard from community prayer time. Word was, several younger families had raised concerns with the elders. Said it wasn't appropriate for him to use the pulpit to push personal grievances. Apparently, Leonard didn't fight it. He just faded into the background. You could say his reign ended not with a bang, but with a sigh. I haven't been back to that church since. And I doubt I will. Even if some people have apologized, even if I get the occasional email with, "Hope you're doing well," or "We miss your energy," I just can't bring myself to sit in a place where judgment came faster than grace. I found new places to sit. There's a coffee shop down on Glenwood South where I like to spend Saturday mornings. They know my order now: small black coffee, cinnamon scone, corner table by the window. Sometimes I bring a book. Other times, I just people watch and listen to the hum of conversations around me. Nobody there knows my history. Nobody assumes I'm generous. Or selfish. Or anything at all. They just see me. It's amazing how healing it can be to be seen without expectation. Brix comes with me sometimes. Not always, but often enough that it's become a quiet ritual. He reads the paper while I sketch. We don't always talk. We don't need to. Sometimes connection isn't loud or dramatic, it's just showing up again and again, without taking anything. He still writes letters. Still journals. And sometimes, he reads them out loud in therapy. One evening, he read something that stuck with me. I used to think Rose was strong because she gave so much without complaint. I realize now she's strong because she finally stopped. That one made me cry. Not because it was poetic. But because it was real. For the first time in a long time, he saw the difference between sacrifice and surrender. Things with Janelle have settled into an odd truce. We don't talk, but we're polite when we see each other. She came to a birthday dinner we had for Brix a few weeks ago. Brought Reggie. We kept conversation surface level: weather, school, some innocent story about Brix's terrible attempts at yard work. I stayed across the table. She didn't try to sit next to me. We exchanged a nod when she left. That was it. It was enough. I don't need reconciliation with everyone. Sometimes you just need the noise to stop. The damage doesn't disappear, but the silence becomes a kind of balm. Reggie, on the other hand, was sweet as ever. He ran up to me at the end of the night and said, "I'm building a spaceship out of Legos. I named the captain after you." I smiled and asked what the captain's job was. "She makes sure nobody yells at each other. Kids see everything." Every so often, someone will ask me if I regret not helping with the tuition. If, knowing everything that followed, I'd go back and just pay it, to avoid the fight, the church drama, the separation. And my answer is always the same. No. Because this wasn't about money. It never was. It was about entitlement. About how some people believe your success obligates you to them. About how silence becomes complicity. About how easy it is for family to disguise manipulation as moral duty. If I had paid that tuition, the story wouldn't have ended there. It would have just been the first chapter in a long, quiet drain on my soul. They would have asked again. And again. And again. Until the resentment turned to rot. Until my name meant resource instead of rose. No. I don't regret standing up. Even if it hurt. Even if it cost me peace for a while. Even if it burned a few bridges. Sometimes, you need the fire. It wasn't until month 10, almost to the day since I walked out of our house with a single suitcase, that the revenge I never asked for, but deeply earned, finally arrived. Not with fire or fury. Not with public humiliation. Not even with an apology. It came with silence. And that silence said everything. It started on a warm Saturday afternoon, just as spring was settling over Raleigh. The air was clean, the kind that makes you want to clean out your closets, trim the hedges, and put your life in order. Brix and I had spent the morning gardening, something we picked up together again, like an old song you remember the lyrics to once it starts playing. That afternoon, I got an email. Subject: leadership transition. It was from the board of elders at the church. They were grateful for Leonard's years of spiritual guidance and deeply appreciative of his commitment to the congregation, but after numerous requests for modern leadership and spiritual inclusiveness, the church was officially moving in a new direction. Translation: they asked him to step down. He wouldn't be doing community prayers anymore. He wouldn't be leading the men's group. And he would no longer be part of the advisory board. They thanked him. But they didn't need him. A day later, I got a message from Marlene, one of the younger members of the church who had always stayed kind to me even through the mess. She was honest, never one to sugarcoat. She said, "Rose, whether you know it or not, you changed something here. You taught people to question the people we'd stopped questioning." That was it. That was the moment. The moment I realized I'd done more than just say no to tuition. I'd cut down a legacy of guilt that had been passed through that church like a generational hymn. And I didn't do it with screaming. Or revenge plots. Or even confrontation. I did it by not giving in. But the true full circle moment? That came 2 weeks later. I had just gotten back from a short work trip, 2 nights in Asheville, helping a small business owner navigate retirement plans. I was tossing my suitcase onto the bed when Brix came into the room, phone in hand. "You're going to want to hear this," he said, eyes wide. He handed me the phone. It was on speaker. Janelle. She sounded flustered, like she was in the middle of pacing. "Brix, Dad's talking about selling the cabin," she was saying. "The one in Blowing Rock. You remember? He says he needs the money. I think he's strapped, like actually strapped. I asked if he wanted to move in with me and he snapped at me like I'd insulted him." "What's going on?" Brix glanced at me, then said, "Maybe you should talk to him about that." She groaned. "Yeah, right. He won't even admit anything's wrong. There was a pause. Then she said, "Has Rose heard about this?" And I smiled. That little smile that's not smug, not mean, but deeply earned. Brooks replied, "Rose doesn't need to hear about everything anymore." After the call ended, I sat on the bed, shoes still on, suitcase still zipped. That cabin had been Leonard's pride. A symbol. A place he hosted family retreats that were less retreat and more controlled lectures disguised as devotionals. It was old, creaky, and sat on a piece of land passed down through generations. He once told me, "This place will always be in the family." Now? He was selling it to cover debts. The same man who once accused me of being selfish with my money, who used his pulpit to shame me, was now quietly, humbly, having to rely on his own resources. Imagine that. I didn't rub it in. I didn't send a text, or post something cryptic online, or show up at a church event wearing something fabulous. I didn't have to. Because real revenge isn't about watching someone suffer. It's about living in a way that proves you didn't need them to succeed. It's about walking back into your own house, setting your bag down, sitting in the quiet, and knowing you won. Not because they lost. But because you never folded. You never surrendered your dignity. You didn't sell your peace for approval. And you didn't let someone else's version of family define your worth. So no, I didn't pay for that private school. I paid for my freedom instead. And it turns out, it was the best investment I've ever made.